Kia ora and welcome to Forest Call. Over the next few weeks we'll be continuing to tell our New Zealand forest story. Pinus radiata is the muscle tree of our plantation forests, due to a remarkable combination of the Californian native growing amazingly well here and as well the effort that's gone in over the years into making it New Zealand's second most economically important plant species after ryegrass. But the role of other tree species is growing, from eucalyptus to indigenous trees already well known for their wood properties. Joining us is Peter Berg. Peter, welcome to Forest Call. Specialty wood products, what's that all about?
Yeah, it's about offering a program that will enable people to grow higher quality species, providing wood for the higher quality wood market in New Zealand and for export. It's also about complementing the existing forest industry, providing a better range of higher quality materials to the industry. And the third thing is that, of course, a lot of people have planted these species in the past. They're sitting out there without necessarily being used all that well. People want to take those to market and add some value to those as well. Adding veneers by interleaving higher strength veneers into things like LVL, we can immediately produce a product which has better properties and which commands a better price in the market. It also opens radiata pine to a bigger range of markets than might otherwise be the case.
Well, let's look at what is interesting a lot of people, and that is indigenous timbers. Kauri, Rimu, Totara.
Yeah, the same thing applies. There's actually a lot of know-how, a lot of knowledge around using native timbers, which hasn't been built on because the ability to harvest native timbers disappeared back in the 1960s and 70s. What we've now found is that there is actually a lot of native timber naturally regrowing on farmland. Northland is a case in point where we have discovered there's something like 200,000 hectares of totara regrowing, some of it 50, 60, 70 years old, able to be harvested immediately. Again, it has the ability either to be used as a solid wood product in its own right, or to complement radiata pine, and I'm thinking of things like weatherboards and so forth on a radiata frame.
How would they have to be managed though? You don't just let them grow?
No, one of the problems with natives, or one of the views I guess that people have, is that they're very slow growing, but the truth is that we've never grown native timber the way that we grow radiata pine and Douglas fir and others. We've been doing trials where we've been thinning and pruning totara. The response to thinning is actually staggering. We have got, within a year, we've got growth rate increases of 3 and 4 times what they were growing at previously, and we're seeing ring widths that look more like radiata pine than a 50-year-old totara tree.
And if you plant them, it's legal to harvest?
If you plant them, it's legal to harvest. If you're using a naturally regenerated stand for wood production, then you've got to get a permit under the Forest Act, and we're working with the ministry to see if we can streamline that process for landowners.
Other than kauri, totara, what other native species are possibilities?
Well, the beech are an obvious one, because I think the area of beech that we have in New Zealand probably exceeds any other native species, and there are also some very good examples of people managing these on a sustainable basis. John Wardle, just out of Christchurch near Oxford, has been managing hard beech now for I think close to 30 years, and very successful annual harvest of beech. The other thing is that we've got established markets for beech. Forever Beech on the west coast, and the Tuatapere operation with silver beech producing high quality timbers that are regularly used in the speciality market.
Just before we finish, Peter, you've been around the industry for an awful long time, a prime advocate of the Forest Growers Levy when it was ultimately established just 6 years ago. It's up for a vote again. What's your views on the renewal of the levy?
Look, I think the levy is a great thing. No secret that I advocated for a long time before we got one. It's an ideal mechanism for forest owners to be able to invest collectively in areas that are advantageous to the forestry sector, and I think that the mechanism that we have chosen, where revenues are collected when wood is harvested, is a good way to ensure that there is a sustainable income to the levy. It's also very fair. I think forest growers need to realise that while they're not paying the levy in a particular year because they're not harvesting, the benefits still flow to them.
Peter Berg, thank you for joining us on Forest Call.
Pleasure.
It's a good moment too to look at this Matai table generously lent to us by Forest Furniture on the North Shore. Thanks for lending us that table. Magnificent. And continuing the show and tell, this book written by my old cricketing teammate Phil Simpson. Everything you wanted to know about this amazing tree, the totara. Coming up, we're looking at a species that's not a New Zealand native. It's the good old Australian eucalyptus, though with the current trials we hope for more success than this old eucalyptus globulus behind me. Our planted forest industry, challenging to be our second primary export earner. Wood's environmentally good in plant and product for building and landscapes. We're great in technology and science, selecting stronger, straighter trees, safer ways to harvest them, cleaner and earthquake-resistant ways to build. Forests, regionally vital for economic development, creating all sorts of jobs. A prime future investment for our nation. Love our forests. There are about 25,000 hectares of Australian eucalyptus plantations in New Zealand. It's our number 3 tree, Douglas fir's the number 2. The eucs grow just about everywhere, but you can find more than half of them in Clutha and Southland. The appeal of these eucalyptus lies in their short wood fibre, good for quality paper, and dense wood strength, as Peter Berg was pointing out. But today we're going to a subcategory of eucalyptus, the dryland eucalyptus, also known as the durable eucs. Their attraction is in the resistance they have to decay in the ground. They neither rot, nor do they need chemical treatments to stop them rotting. That's interesting for a whole lot of land users who need posts. In particular, grape growers wanting organic certification for their vineyards. Our dryland eucalypt story today takes us up the Waihopai Valley in upland Marlborough and to proceed in North Canterbury. But we begin on the Blenheim Flats, where, so far, the very few eucalypt posts available are doing very well.
They're untreated, so there's no concern about any of those chemical products. If they do break, you can cut them up and put them in the fire, that sort of thing. For us, they're a good alternative. Being an organic vineyard, we're not allowed to use any treated posts. So for us, the eucalypt posts would be great. The only one issue we have is that if you want to put a nail in them, you have to bring a drill with you to do that. But that's not really a big deal.
And durability, Peter?
So far, brilliant. These posts have been in the ground here 10 plus years. I've been here 4 years, and I've only seen two broken in that time, out of about 300 or so.
So if there was a plentiful supply, you'd be in the market for them?
Absolutely, yep, absolutely we would.
David, you're standing behind a eucalypt tree, otherwise known as an ironbark. You're a fan of it. Why?
Well, I like the name of it actually, and it's really called a red ironbark. And as you can see, it's growing at a good height and doing very well here. Probably an area that wouldn't be much good for anything else. So it's been a very good test for them.
This is where we have pedigreed individuals. We know the mothers of all of the trees, and we've laid them out in a random way so that we can compare the different performance of those different families one against the other. And so now if you actually look around the stand and see how it's developing, some of the best looking trees, there's one here there. It's nice and straight. It's tall. It's one of the tallest trees in the stand. So this would be the type of individual from that family that we'd be selecting to go into our propagation program. When you look up there,
Yeah.
we've got flowering.
Yeah.
And that's very exciting, actually.
Yes,
We haven't seen flowering on the trees before, so this is a real opportunity for us. We're going to be doing an assessment in here to choose the best trees, and you can see which ones are performing well, and then taking signwood from the upper crown, and then that will go down to proseed. And at proseed is where we've actually got the grafting work going on.
It's very difficult to root eucalyptus cuttings. They need to have water on the leaf at all times. We can't afford to have the leaves dry out at all. If they do, they suffer stress, and that initiates a reaction in the cuttings where the leaves abscission off. They just drop off. That happens quite quickly. So we have to keep mist on them. We also have bottom heat. We apply bottom heat, 23 degrees Celsius underneath, and that promotes rapid callousing and root growth. So they're looking to these species like Basistoana here, like Globoidea quadrangulata, and these trees lay down durable heartwood very early in their life. And what we've found is, through the studies, is that is heritable, that you can select for it. So physiologically, this tree is about 10 years old, and it is coming now into floral maturity. You can see that the leaves have gone from the oval shape, the juvenile oval shape, and they've matured into the adult lanceolate shape that is so typical of eucalyptus. And for beekeepers, this species, Eucalyptus basistoana, is a very good nectar producer. I've seen older trees than this, absolutely smothered with flower and smothered with bees. They're just so excited to have so much nectar available. Durability is the key with the species that the Dryland Forest Initiative is working with. There was quite a scare in the Marlborough region with the vineyards where they thought that the copper chrome arsenate that was being used to preserve the radiata posts for supporting the vines, they thought that was leaching into the ground. They found out that the levels that they had detected were actually naturally occurring, but nevertheless they're very keen to move to something that is a little more natural. The expectation is that we will have a line of trees that will produce durable wood for vineyard posts, for cross arms on telegraph poles, and for railway sleepers.
How durable is durable?
If you look around New Zealand railways, that is Australian hardwood timber.
So they'll outlive us.
Yes, exactly, yeah.
Many of these durable eucalyptus species have very high wood density. When you look at the density of New Zealand's most widely used timber, which is radiata pine, that's 500 kilos to the cubic metre. This ironbark, for example, on our left here, this species, as a mature tree, can produce timber which is 1,000 kilos to the cubic metre. So in other words, that's double the weight of the radiata pine. Our durable eucalypts, with their high density, are a real opportunity for landowners to earn carbon credits. In a case like David's, with his whole farming business and his grape growing business, with the forestry business alongside of this, he can be carbon neutral. This is a breeding trial or breeding population of Eucalyptus basistoana. It will last in the ground, the heart will last in the ground for more than 25 years. And that's the sort of time frame that we needed if we were going to successfully grow a suitable tree species that could be used confidently by vineyards. This is a fairly long way inland. We've got mountains less than 10 kilometres away that are well over 2,000 metres in height, so we can get some real cold frosts, and yet the trees here, they've thrived in this environment. They're not growing as fast as they may grow on other sites, but from the point of view of selecting the best individuals that are highly adapted to the cooler conditions in New Zealand, this site is a real goldmine to us. We've now got something like 5,000 individual trees that we've planted here, and so that in time we will select the very, say, top 50 individuals from the stand for further propagation. Eucalyptus being in the Myrtaceae family, there is some risk that myrtle rust will develop with these species. However, in the cooler parts of Australia, and that's where many of our species have been selected from, so this is the southeast corner down into Victoria, that the myrtle rust, at least at this stage, hasn't become really significant. Onto the site in New Zealand, and so we're going to allow for the word's outcrossing, where the genetics from all of the different collections of Sistoana in Australia have the opportunity to recombine, and that's when we get major increases. Right behind us in the trail that you can see is another species called Eucalyptus agafloea. That's one of the rarest eucalypts that is left, or that in Australia. There's less than 200 mother plants still alive over there. Then another species is Eucalyptus quadrangulata. Now that's an unusual species, and the quadrangulata is descriptive actually of the small stems, that when they grow as a young tree they're square rather than round. But that doesn't continue as the tree develops. It would be nice to have a square tree, Don, but a round one is still what you get. It's the species that we've found that are durable, that are also drought tolerant. They are suited to these drier regions of New Zealand.
This property is a little over 13 hectares, and there would be around about 6,000 posts on this property. So if you scale that up for Marlborough, which has just hit around about the 30,000 hectare mark, again at 600 posts per hectare, that's about 18 million. It's a lot of timber.
And at a national level, there are up to 27 million posts in New Zealand vineyards, as well as other potential durable timber uses for these dryland eucalyptus. The Drylands Forestry Initiative is widely funded, including strong support from the Forest Growers Levy and absolutely vital input from the Forestry Department at Canterbury University. Coming up, we go to Matakana and visit a nursery of indigenous trees which were seedlings, which nobody wanted a decade ago, and have been left to grow ever since.
I've grown up on a kiwi fruit farm in Motueka, west of Nelson. I picked forestry because it's got a good balance of inside work and outside work, which I like the outdoors, so that was one of the things that drew me to it. For the past 3 years, I've been a technical forester in the harvesting operations team. I've recently changed roles, so I'm now a supply chain technician. The company that I work for, we're continually improving and trying to make things simple, but there is a lot of detail that goes into cutting the forest down and getting the right wood to the right customer on time. I get a good balance of office work as well as practical work, so I go out to the forest and I also go visit Port Picton and Port Nelson. I went there because my sister told me about it. She did a liberal paper when she was studying accounting, and she said that she would have done it if she knew about it earlier. So between the administrator and Nelson Forests, I got a little bit of an insight before I started university, and yeah, I didn't really know anything else, so I went down and gave it a go. It's a great course. I enjoyed it for the fact that it wasn't just all academic work. We got a good balance of field work and inside work, and a requirement, a part of the Bachelor of Forestry degree, you've got to do 90 days professional work, which really helped give a good foundation for the overall learning. With the good relationships that School of Forestry has with the wider industry, it's really helped to get jobs. Anybody that wanted a job that didn't choose to travel straight after their degree got a job. Most people got the jobs in the regions that they wanted, and I think everybody got a reasonable starting salary. I was very fortunate to be able to get a job back in Nelson. I was lucky enough to be a scholarship student through my 4 years of studying with Nelson Forests. So at the end of it, it just happened to be good timing that someone was retiring, so I could start at Nelson Forests. I've been gaining a lot of knowledge from the experienced people in our company, and there's a wealth of knowledge in Nelson Forests. Recently I was lucky enough to go to Japan and learn about lean manufacturing, which our company's been implementing over the past few years. So lean manufacturing's learning about continually improving things and systems in your workplace. There's lots of environmental benefits that forestry provides. It improves water quality, it helps with erosion, it improves biodiversity, and it locks up carbon dioxide. I'm confident that there's a future in New Zealand forestry because it's a growing industry. I also see lots of potential in the innovative technology that's getting designed now, and that's going to keep continuing and keep improving.
Well, Don, this is Matakana Native Trees Limited in Matakana, hence the name. And we started 12 years ago when we bought the land without very much understanding what we were going to do with it, but things happened and we became a native big tree nursery.
So a north of Auckland climate and good fertile peat soils. You couldn't really go wrong, could you?
Well, that's right. Both of those attributes are correct. The beautiful peat formed by a kauri forest that was bowled by a tsunami 40,000 years ago, and now it's got deep peat with those old kauri logs embedded in the soil. You have to clear those out to farm it, and the climate, which is a couple of degrees warmer than Auckland. It's a little microclimate, has very little winter dormancy.
Now tell us about how, more by accident than design, you had these big trees here.
Well,
bigger than you would expect in a nursery.
So when we started the nursery, we had to make decisions on what we were going to grow. So we grew certain species, not really understanding the demand, and we found that we had too many. It coincided with the global financial crisis, a little bit of confidence lost in the economy, not so many native trees bought. We were left with the trees. So we ran them out in the field, and some of them we planted too many of, like matai. Others we planted not enough of, for example, kaikatea and taurari. But generally speaking, it was an interesting exercise, and 10 years later, we're seeing just what these trees can do in this climate and how tall they can get and how big the bole of the tree is that could be eventually milled.
So even though you were not looking for experimenting on and observing growth rates on what a later generation, I guess, is looking now at as commercial production species, you've got some trees here at Matakana that after a decade could give some indications as to what potentially they might be.
Yes, we think so. We can look at some
let's
of
go
them.
and have a look. We've got some decade-old kauri. They're looking pretty impressive for something that's supposed to be a slow-growing indigenous tree.
Exactly. So I think that the myth that all natives are slow needs to be dispelled, and trees like kauri and riwariwa and kaikatea, those three trees, for example, all good timber trees, are not slow in the right conditions. And we're north, but the north's a big place, and there's plenty of space and plenty of land that's underutilised that could, I think, be used to grow these native timber trees and at good rates.
Well, we've got the kauri behind us. That's one that's not identified first, but still potentially, because it's known as a timber, just maybe what would be the obstacle? What would be the biggest drawback in commercial production?
Well, one obstacle is that for karri nurseries to sell karri plants, there's a limited demand, and therefore there's not as many grown as for some other species. So to get karri underway, you have to take the seed at the right time of the year, which is March or April, and then propagate the seedlings, propagate them into seedlings, and then these have to grow. So that's a...
What's the lead time then before you plant out?
I would say that if you decide you want, say 1% of the 100 million trees a year in karri, that's what's that, a million trees, you're going to need to harvest very specifically for those. Now, 2018 is too late to harvest. You've got to wait till 2019 crop. And they're not that easy to harvest, so there's a particular activity to harvest karri trees. And then from that point, it would be 2 years, I think, before you've got them ready to plant out into the reforestation project. So we planted these, as I say, when we didn't have any other home for the smaller karri in a bag. So we planted them at about 2 metres in a line here, in retrospect too close together, in about 2009. So they're about coming into their 10th year, say 9 years old, doing probably about 7 metres in height, most of them. And they started reasonably the same speed that we're getting. So we're getting, you might say, almost a metre a year.
Yeah.
But this is beautiful growing conditions. Midwinter day, and you've got to have
great peat soil,
and there'll be growth today.
Yes.
And there has been, we had 4 or 5 dry days. There's no real winter, there's no real dormancy here in Matakana. And so the karri line, of course, is Kawhia to Te Puke, I believe. North of that, they grow naturally, endemically, and the further north, the quicker the growth, I think, in general terms, because growth happens when the conditions are right, and if there's no real dormancy, growth is reasonably continuous. The good thing about all the natives is that they don't mind bad soil. They know all about clay, they know about wind, they know about summer drought, basically. But I would say that in 50 years' time, this will be millable here in Matakana. I'm not saying you've planted in high elevated Waikato land and you'll get it in 50 years. And it's certainly, radiata, of course, is 25 to 30 years. But I don't think it's going to be very far behind that it would be millable. Now, of course, you might say, well, between 50 and 100 years, every 5 years is going to be double in value because the millability, the timber content would be even greater. I don't know. These are calculations.
I don't think anybody knows.
No, exactly. Well, that's the thing. There's very few examples anywhere.
Well, behind us here, giants of the forest eventually in the matai, but they're a little scrubbier when they're smaller.
Yes, the juvenile stage where they're wildly divaricated. It's fantastic and beautiful. People come here and say, "Oh, what happened to those? They're all dead." But actually, they're not. In the late winter and early spring, they start to get a real mahogany look about them, which fades a little bit as the summer continues. But they're beautiful. So they're not fast, but they are,
Same
arguably
age as the kauri we saw before, but only a fraction of the height.
Yes, precisely. Yeah, planted at the same stage. But 1 or 2 of them are getting up to, say, 3.5 metres, and also manifesting the adult foliage, which is very like Miro. So Miro, the brother of Matai, has no juvenile foliage. It goes straight into its adult form. Matai, which is arguably the world's greatest flooring timber, is also has that juvenile form, which gradually comes out of.
Again, our next tree, very much a northern tree, non puriri, and a great timber tree, this one.
Yes. The difficulty about puriri, I think, in terms of timber, is that it wants to spread. It wants to be a spreading tree, often multi-leaded, and that of course means that you've got to do a lot of work to get them going up straight. And these ones are examples. You know, they're going a little bit sideways and hard. Well, they have to prune a big limb off to keep them going upright.
But a fantastic timber.
Very good timber and a beautiful tree, because it's got, amazingly, it's got flowers and fruit pretty much 12 months of the year. So how does that happen?
We know an awful lot about how pine trees grow, but as far as kauri and many of the other native species with a potential for timber production, we know next to nothing. But what we do know is that if these trees are an indication after a decade of growth, there's plenty of potential in kauri. Our planted forest industry, challenging to be our second primary export earner. Wood's environmentally good in plant and product for building and landscapes. We're great in technology and science, selecting stronger, straighter trees, safer ways to harvest them, cleaner and earthquake-resistant ways to build. Forests, regionally vital for economic development, creating all sorts of jobs. A prime future investment for our nation. Love our forests. On Forest Call next week, we look at the hot topic of health and safety in our forests, safer gear such as mechanical harvesting machines, and better practices to cut our accident rate. But there's health issues in forestry as well. That's Forest Call for this week. We'll be back again next week. Ka kite.